I'm Greg Fairchild. At the Darden School, I teach strategy, ethics, and entrepreneurship. And I want to talk with you a little bit about some of the course materials I've produced for the entrepreneurship sequence. Many of you that are out there are asked the question I always get asked. I'm in a plane, I'm in an airport, I'm visiting with family and friends, and someone says, gee, I'm not sure how one can teach entrepreneurship. I think it's born. And you have been asked that question. I've been asked that question. What we've been doing at the Darden School over some time is trying to produce materials that don't so much answer the question of whether someone is born or not into being an entrepreneur. But we try to speak to the student in an MBA program who more likely than not is highly interested in entrepreneurship, but likely hasn't come from a background where they might have been exposed to the types of challenges one faces as an entrepreneur, and that they might be different from what they might find when operating in a large corporation. Let me give you a few examples. The financing of businesses is front and foremost. Capital acquisition is one of those questions that always comes up. Well, our students in finance would have known a lot about the questions of how one does international trade finance or corporate finance. But the notion of how you fund a very small privately held firm, most likely coming from either friends and family or secondly from some sort of trade credit or even a bank, isn't a question that usually would flow into the generalized entrepreneurship program. There have been discussions of venture capital, which of course is highly interesting, but really only represents less than 10% of all small venture financing, and certainly in down years, in down economies, represents even less than that. So we have course materials, for instance, that talk about how one goes out and gets a bank loan. I have a case that's called Sustad and bank loans. And this particular case talks about an entrepreneur in Los Angeles who is actually seeking capital from Wells Fargo Bank. And the case is actually written from the perspective of the commercial loan officer within Wells Fargo. This, again, is a career that some MBAs might find themselves in, and so in that sense, it takes a protagonist view that MBAs might find themselves in at some point in their future. But at the same time, the case turns on the question of whether this existing tostada manufacturer in Los Angeles, in fact, would be a good business for this company to lend to. It provides great discussion about the difference between lending and investing. The types of things that go into the underwriting of a loan within a bank. And these are things that a small business owner would want to know, a future entrepreneur would want to know as he or she went forward in thinking about funding and financing their business. Another one of the cases that we have is called Green Room Productions. And Green Room Productions is meant to place students in a classic dilemma that they find themselves in. Three former classmates from Dartmouth in fact find themselves at another university, the University of Virginia, later on in life. And the three of them, each of them having different skills, different amounts of capital, different orientations, and some currently employed, some not, decide to come together on the creation of a business that would do the back office, behind the website transactions that would be involved in the travel industry. Now, the students find out later on in the debrief that this becomes a very successful company called TRX. But in the early stage, the discussion is about these three individuals, long-term friends, who are thinking about how to split equity. They're thinking about how to deal with some challenges involving their own personal lives and their families, and how they might come together with a firm, where they might locate that firm, a lot of the things that involve the early assembly of a company. And in so many ways, this case really puts students in a situation that, again, they might not normally talk about when talking about equity questions or board of director questions in a large corporation. Another stage that a business might find itself in is after this business has actually established its operating procedures and finds that it has a solid revenue base and in fact is thinking now about how it might grow to become a truly large company. That's the perspective taken in a multi-party case that has been developed, the Saunders, Carp, and Dollar Tree case sequence. This is a multimedia case. It provides both text, but also spreadsheets and actually video that involve two parties that are coming together. One of these is a newly formed, in fact, entrepreneurial private equity firm a group of individuals operating in a large banking organization and actually started private equity for a large bank in New York City, decide that they're going to go out on their own and start their own new private equity firm. They meet up with a series of entrepreneurs in the rural South in Virginia who have an idea about single price point discount retailing, and that single price point being dollar stores. And in fact, the company at the time has had some great success, but the owners, who've largely financed through their family and hold all the equity, are now thinking about how they might secure a certain type of economic future for themselves and their families, and in fact spread the risk associated with the business to others. This private equity firm newly formed is looking for a good hit, a big hit as they start off. And the case actually is set up in such a way where the goals and objectives of each party aren't exactly aligned. And in some ways they have to then have a discussion, have a negotiation which will lead to, we hope, an area of mutual agreement that can be struck. And what's at stake is if the deal does or doesn't happen, the newly formed private equity firm, if it doesn't happen, loses a shot at a business that could grow. And if it doesn't happen for the family that owns this privately held firm, well, if they don't find the capital they need, they'll do fine as their business continues, but it may not reach the scale that they'd hoped. And the students are able to have these negotiations outside of class, and there's a rich discussion along with video that has the actual players talking about their perspectives at the time and what eventually occurs in a debrief component. The story here is one where there were a lot of reasons why the deal wouldn't have worked, and in fact in many of the cases the deal doesn't work, the cases that the students play out in class. What happens in reality though is that the students hear in the debrief how the two parties did meet mutual agreement, and in fact Dollar Tree Stores is one of the most successful discount retailers now in the country. About a $4 billion annual revenue at last look. The company IPOs just a few years after the deal is struck, and it's a cautionary tale for students about how if you cannot align on interest and you cannot discuss things in compatible ways, it's what you might lose. And so in this way it's very powerful.